So I'd like to take a moment to introduce Deborah Zuloaga. Deborah is our co-chair for our work group, and we are so pleased that she has committed to being here today and helping us out to help facilitate the session and welcome our guest speaker. Deborah.
Thank you, Carol. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Carol and Ivy. They are just phenomenal in keeping this organization moving forward on task and just doing a great job of supporting the work of United Way Next. I am a 25-year veteran of local United Way. I retired about a year ago after serving as CEO of the United Way in El Paso, Texas. El Paso, Texas is proudly located on the US-Mexico border, and we are proud to be a binational, bicultural community and also one of the safest cities in the US. So I'm very, very proud to be coming to you from El Paso, Texas. But I'm especially proud to be introducing our speaker today. Our speaker today is Jen Hsu-Bishop, and she is the Executive Impact and Equity Officer of the United Way of South Central Michigan. And this is a roundtable. It's a conversation, but we're really excited to hear from Jen. As Carol noted to me yesterday was that, the last time the roundtable met was in November. And obviously, I think none of us need to be reminded of how much has changed in our country in the last few months. So I think it's really important that we have this conversation, and I'm very grateful to Jen that they are going to lead us on this, lead us in this conversation. So with that, Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Deborah. I appreciate it. I want to start off with a couple of introductions for myself as well. As Deborah mentioned, I serve as the Executive Impact and Equity Officer with United Way of South Central Michigan. We cover 6 counties in South Central Michigan, just as the name sounds like. And as part of that, I want to recognize the people of the 3 fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples, on whose land I'm calling from today and whose land I live on. The people of 3 fires are indigenous to our community here in Michigan, and this is their ancestral territory. It's important for me to acknowledge the histories and traditions of the people who originated here first and who are still here and tend to the land always. And as a visual description of myself, I am a medium build Asian American. My ancestry is Chinese. I have short crop black hair, and I'm wearing a dress shirt with geometric patterns with a knit cardigan on. And again, these are practices I find are important for me to live into the equity, diversity, inclusion work that is deeply important to me. I like to consider myself one of the very, very lucky folks who has been in this work around equity, diversity, and inclusion for my entire career. It is both an avocation and a vocation for me, something that I am passionate about, that I do in and out of my professional work. And so I'd like to invite our audience today, for those who are able to join us on camera if you're willing, to provide some access around the interaction here and recognize that not everyone is able to do that. And for you all to take care of yourselves in whatever way makes sense. And so if you don't mind, I'd love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat, your name, maybe where you're coming from. And I'd like you to answer the question, what is a leader? Today's session was titled The Role of Leaders in Advancing Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So I'd like folks to answer that question. What is a leader? Along with a little introduction. So if you don't mind, and thank you, Ivy, for dropping that prompt into the chat. We'll give folks a couple minutes here to both follow along the chat and to input their own response. As folks are finding the chat function, I'm wondering if anyone might be willing to come off mute and to share. What is a leader? How do you define that? Thank you, Carol, for kicking us off. A leader is someone who is serving as a role model for others. What else? Naima, and please correct me if I have gotten that pronunciation wrong. A leader is someone who is by and for the collective and lives by their values to advocate for a better world for all. Thank you. A leader is someone willing to take responsibility for group processes and outcomes. Michaela, a leader is somebody who sees the strengths and skills in others, encourages them to use those strengths in advancement of said mission and goal. Megan, leader inspires others to take ownership of their output, ideas, products, services, energy, and strive to do their best. Melena, a leader is someone at the helm of a project or team. Anyone can be a leader. Deborah, thank you. A leader is someone who has a vision and commitment to serving others. Azur, to me, a leader is someone that knows that it takes around a team to do something big and that uplifting others does not diminish anyone else. I love that consideration around power, right? To have power and to have access to power does not diminish anyone else's access to power. And the concerns oftentimes that we hear is not about access to power, but exclusivity and dominance, right? And so uplifting others doesn't diminish anyone else. Paulina, there are some of us in Salt Lake trying to get in. All right, Ivy, I know that you are working your butt off over there trying to help folks get in. Issy here says a leader is someone who sets the vision and values for others to follow. I see so many common threads in what you all have shared around influence, right? Around modeling, around responsibility. And what I appreciate that you all have shared is that nobody said a position is positionality is a requirement for leadership. I really appreciate that this group, it's clear that folks have thought about this, right? And understand in a shared way that a leader is somebody who can have some kind of influence. So for me, a definition I like to use to guide us, and I'll drop this in the chat for folks who might find that helpful. A leader is somebody who can have some kind of influence on people, on organizations, or on systems. And what I'm confident of is that every single one of us in this space is a leader because each and every one of us here has the ability to make that sort of influence. And so I want to shift into, to get us going, some research, some background, some context. As both Carol and Deborah really alluded to and illuminated, we're in a really important moment right now to continue to have conversations around what it means to engage in equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, access conversations, and for us to talk to each other. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time at the top of our session today, providing some context, and then I'd like to invite you all to co-create our conversation, to lead that along with the UW Next team and with me here for us to talk with each other. So a little bit that I'm really thinking about is, one, I proposed this topic back in June of 2024. We know that a lot has changed since then, but I want to be really clear, a lot has not. So a report from Democracy Forward in late 2024 showed that as they tracked 70 cases and provided examples of dozens of cases filed in the year after the Supreme Court ruled to prohibit the explicit use of race in college admission programs. In that case, for those of you who are familiar, Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and UNC. The report that Democracy Forward found was that despite attempts by organizers to undermine racial equity programs and equity programs at large through the filing of just an avalanche of lawsuits. The vast majority of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs challenged remain on solid footing. And what's important to highlight there is that the courts have also affirmed that anti-discrimination, EEO, and diversity trainings are not only lawful, but the EEOC has been clear that this work is still crucial, right? And supports a really broad understanding of compliance with civil rights laws. And so I want to remind us that settled case law is still fairly clear in this space, that not only is this permissible, in fact, we ought to be compelled to consider how our policies, how our practices create access for everyone to reach their full potential. And that hasn't changed. And that, in fact, right, our core federal and state equal employment opportunity laws haven't changed. Of course, right, we continue to keep up to date on this, and I encourage you all, right, I'm not legal counsel, and so I know that goes without saying, right, to consult the experts in this area that are guiding and helping you make the right decisions for yourself, your organizations, and the spaces that you have influence over, that companies and organizations also have First Amendment rights to express their views on diversity, equity, and inclusion. That right was affirmed, right, in the spring of 2024 by a conservative-leaning panel of judges in the 11th Circuit that struck down, right, Florida's prohibition of companies expressing certain ideas in diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings. Of course, we are seeing a lot of interpretation, a lot of guidelines coming up. But it's important for us to be really clear on what is settled case law and how does that help us, right, find our understanding of where we can travel in this space. And I want to come back to some really core research by an organization called Equality Action Center that really looked at what trainings, what action are being taken, and how is it influencing our organization's ability to engage in this space meaningfully. And what they found is that oftentimes the approaches that have the most impact often actually hold the lowest legal risk. I know this is a conversation that a lot of folks are having within their organizations. So that's where I want to start, but that's not where we're going to end the conversation. So please stay with me for just a little bit longer. And I want to pivot us a little bit also from that conversation. So using audits to root out bias or inequity in current processes to ensure equal employment opportunity for all employees. Not only is that effective, it's legal. Standardizing decision-making to ensure that it's evidence-based and consistent is not only effective, but legal. And building mechanisms to spot and correct for factors like culture fit that can embed bias is important and effective, right, for us to be thinking about. Right, I want to be really clear that planning based on risk alone is inherently at odds with planning based on people's needs. And so what I would encourage us to think about and what I'd encourage us to have more conversation and depth around is what is our mission? And to ask the questions. How do we achieve our mission in a way that serves those situated furthest from success? And who is that? And how are we being clear on our values and setting a vision with our team? So many of you, when I asked the question, what is a leader, was really clear, right? This is an individual that helps set vision, right? Inspires folks, right, to live into that and to carry out what's important to that body of people. And so I often come back to this, and this is a space in which I want to prompt some thinking today. Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a quote that many people are probably familiar with. It says, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality, right? And this is a space that I want to ask the question, so what, right? Our work now as leaders is not to do everything, And I imagine a lot of folks share this sense in this space today of where do we start when it feels like the attack is coming from all sides? Our work is not to solve all of it today or even tomorrow, but I'd encourage us to take a consideration that Adrienne Marie Brown oftentimes shares, that a friend and colleague of hers shared, by the name of Gibran Rivera, the question, what is the next most elegant step? And Brown goes on to explain that it's choosing to take an action that is possible and strategic based on who is taking it, right? You, others that you're guiding, and where they're trying to go. That ought to be our question. What's the next most elegant step? Not how are we solving all of this today or even tomorrow? And so how do we do that in a way, right? That begs the question around how do we center the voices of those most impacted in this moment? How are we listening? How are we guided by individuals, right, who are closest to the impact? And so some final thoughts before I want to open it up to this group to have some rich conversation, to offer your insights and offer questions for the group to contend with is this moment takes courage. And from my experience, it's a whole lot easier to have courage when we're in community and building solidarity. It's difficult to have courage when you feel like you're the only one out there, when you're an island. And the reality is none of us have to be, and none of us are truly on an island. And so how are we building that solidarity so we can be courageous in this moment? Because I would encourage and implore us to consider what's at stake, what resources, influence, and power do we already hold that allow us to be courageous and to take risk? And where can we build coalitions so that, right, when we are feeling vulnerable, we know that we have folks who are in this space with us, not just interpersonally, but organizationally. Where are our points of strength? And as conveners in our communities, we have relationships, right, with both private, public, municipal entities. I think that is one of the most significant strengths that I value about the network is our ability to really cut across discipline, sector, and to really uplift voices, right? For us, we talk a lot about our North Star is Allison equity. That hasn't changed in the last 6 months. That hasn't changed in the last 5 years. Our ability to support Allison equity requires us to have a conversation around courage, around our North Star, and who we serve ought to continue to be guided by that mission. And so with that, I would really love to invite this group to come off mute, to use the chat, to communicate with Ivy if you'd like to keep your question anonymous or confidential, rather. Ivy would be the only one with access to your username. To ask a question, what's on your mind, offer an insight, some wisdom in this space, and let's have a conversation.
And feel free to also use the raise hand reaction or anything if it makes it easier for you guys.
So Jen, let me start with kind of a broad question. I mean, I love what you just said, and I think it was such a good reminder because I think we all have been in this kind of mind space of where do we go with this? I think your thoughts were just such a good kind of reset for us. But how do we move forward given the current situation? I mean, where do we set the priorities? Where do we go from here?
I'd like to invite our audience to consider offering some insight and wisdom on where you all are starting. I'm certainly somebody in this space. I can offer a perspective, but I certainly know that you all are doing great work in the space as well. So I'll offer a perspective and invite others to share theirs. I think the starting point is being really clear on what our mission is for United Ways, for community agencies, and to have that really, right, honest and strategic conversation. Who are we and what is our mission?
Right.
And what do we have to do in order to advance that, right? And so for our organization, right, if we are thinking about how are we lifting up Alice households, creating access to basic needs, right, and having an impact in our community, the question is for us, what are we going to do internally and externally that advances that work? So for us, that means we need to continue to be having conversations around the structure of our organization, our leadership, how we invite people into our organization that reflects the community and particularly reflects Alice, right? Because we believe, I believe, that those, right, closest to the problem are closest to the solution, right? And that's fundamental, that we have to continue to rely on, and that includes ourselves, right? Folks who are impacted in this current socio-political moment, but also how are we driving mission through that work? And so for me, that means when funding is at stake, right? This is a conversation I know every single one of our nonprofits, United Ways, are contending with. When funding is at risk, when do we bend to that, right? When do we shift who we are fundamentally, our values, and how we approach this work, or do we, right? And when guidelines come out, for example, that are threatening the way that we are approaching equity, diversity, and inclusion, are those guidelines based in case law, settled case law, actual law? Are they threats, right? And how are we thinking about how we do our work in that context? Are we talking to our nonprofit partners? Are we talking to corporate partners? Are we talking to our municipalities? Who is vulnerable in this moment, right? And how are we creating spaces, right? Impact priorities, and fundamentally, how are we talking about this work publicly that takes courage and says, this is important to us. Our community members have not changed, right? And yet who is vulnerable, right? And that includes, right, our BIPOC community, immigrants and refugees, especially individuals who are on and underdocumented, our LGBTQIA plus community members, individuals who are disabled and identify as having a disability. And I can go on and on. I want to be really clear. Our community members haven't changed, and yet those vulnerabilities continue to be highlighted in our community. How do we show up as an organization? How do we show up as partners? To be really clear, what are the supports? Where are the gaps? And where can we come into that, right? As organizations, individuals, and leaders to build solidarity. Because the reality is, sitting back right now, pulling back some of our, right, equity, diversity, and inclusion alignments makes all of us more vulnerable. And we really need to assess who are we in this moment and how are we advancing our core mission. And so I want to recognize, Laura, I saw that you had your hand up for quite a while. I apologize for that pause. What questions, what would you add to this conversation? What are you doing in this space?
Yeah, so our executive committee met 2 days ago to discuss exactly this. And it seems to me that they are walking a tightrope between not being willing to change who we are, what we do, what our mission is, what our work is, and the need to perhaps change how we talk about our work, so that, number one, we don't potentially alienate certain donors, and we don't threaten our funding, because a lot of the direct work that we do, it trickles down through a variety of organizations, but it originates from the federal government. And, so there's this kind of juggling act, how do we not let it change us, but yet how do we keep our funding so that we can keep on doing this work? And I just wanted to hear if, I was curious to see if any other organizations and their boards or executive committees had been having the same conversations and where y'all landed.
Come on, y'all. I know you're having these conversations. Help Laura out here. What is the conversation that you're having? What are these courageous conversations and where are you landing? Because I hear a lot of concern, but where I have a lot of hopefulness is that there's a lot of folks finding meaningful solutions in their community, having courageous conversations. I'm willing to offer perspective, but I'd like to take a facilitator pause here, offer some silence and quiet, and encourage some folks to have some courage to share where they're coming from.
So here we're with Salt Lake. I think one thing that our director has recently shared, the 211 director specifically, has been, unfortunately, we are refraining from using like DEIB language, but we are now trying to say all, because our goal here at 211 and Utah's Promise is to have all kids and families 100% with their needs met. So instead of just, referring to the marginalized communities or BIPOC, we're trying to just refrain from that language and being inclusive by saying all, because ultimately that is our goal. But I think that has helped with feelings of, donors probably not wanting to work with us because we are just focusing on one community, but no, we're shifting into being inclusive for everyone in the state.
Yeah, some of the language that our board kind of preliminarily settled on was we reflect our whole community and we want all to thrive. And we've kind of been, looking at lists of bad words to make sure that we don't use any of them, but still convey the same meaning.
A question.
Oh.
Oh, go ahead, Ivy.
I was just going to mention, because I know as somebody that helps facilitate similar conversations and things like that, one of the things that I recognize is that sometimes people are scared to have these conversations simply because they worry about the vocabulary or the vernacular. They want to make sure that they are using the right terminology and things like that. Even just between the difference of somebody identifying or using the term like handicap versus disabled, or disabled versus differing abilities, things like that. I know sometimes people are just worried that they're not going to say the right thing. And I think people in the communities that we've talked about, myself being neurodivergent and chronically ill and disabled, or somebody else maybe being POC or LGBTQIA+ or anything like that, we recognize that. So sometimes it's even just say the thing. We know you're going to say it wrong, but we know that you usually have good intention behind it. That sometimes helps in those things. It's okay to say the wrong thing sometimes.
Thanks, Ivy. And I'll add on to that. A building block is none of us are experts in anyone else's identities or experiences but our own, right? And so cultivating a sense of wonder, a sense of openness to learn is key. We're never going to arrive, right? That's not the goal. It's to be on this journey. I think in addition to that, Ivy, is to continue to listen deeply when people offer feedback, right? And so it's not about never making mistakes. We're human, and that's inherent to who we are. And also when and if we make mistakes, to take that as a gift of feedback when somebody offers us, right, a way of thinking, a way of talking that might be more honoring to that person's identity. I want to recognize that Michaela had a hand up, wondering if you're still interested in sharing some considerations here.
Yes, thank you so much. First, I want to just say thank you for allowing this safe and brave space for us to discuss this. It's sometimes hard to do, especially in a work setting, when we have so much that's on our minds externally and at home and all of that, and our own personal feelings about things, and then what we have to do at work. So it's a little, it's definitely different. I think I'm at the place where I'm thinking to myself, where do we draw the line? If we are willing to change language, roll back DEI initiatives, scrub our websites for a specific language that, I mean, that someone is telling us how they define it as illegal, which we know it's not because it's not against the law. Discrimination Title 7, I believe, is still the same, right? It hasn't changed. But if we do that now, my fear is that what is that going to cost us? So I know we're afraid to lose the federal funding and there's a cost there, right, for us to do our programming, but even more, there is a human cost. And are we willing to, okay, we'll scrub it now, we'll do this, we'll roll back. And I'm not, saying that it's wrong for anyone who has done that. I know we're just all trying to navigate this difficult time. But what if now they'll say, okay, well, now we're taking women. You can't have, Women United. You can't we're no longer giving services to this particular group. So it's kind of like it pushes that envelope more and more and more. And to me, that is my greatest fear. I feel like when I grew up, my mom always told me, you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And I don't want to be, going with the the wave of all these words, which it's a lot of them. I have a list that actually was created by the Republican Party, but it's a list of words. There's so much things you can't say, and I just don't think that if we fall in line, like I want us to stand on our values, right? But also making sure that we're not just swaying with whatever the new thing is. So I just wanted to share that. Hopefully, please hear my heart when I say these words, and I'm not being, like accusatory or anything like that. I just wanted to share my truth. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I think that's such a insightful, incisive question. And I think the questions are really where we find so much of who we are in this moment and who we're willing to be as organizations, as leaders in the space. The question that I think what I'm really thinking about hearing that, and Michaela, thank you for that. And please let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
It's Michaela. Sorry.
Michaela, thank you so much.
No problem.
I appreciate it. Michaela, I think one of the things that's really resonating with me and what you've shared is not just what's the line, but what you asked around what the risk is to continuing down that path, right? And none of us can answer that for any other organization or any other person. But I think there's such a value in that piece around what do we lose in terms of our ability to connect with the humanness, right, of our work? What is the potential consequence of what if we lose it anyways when we make these concessions, right? What if down the way we lose the funding anyways, right? How will we look back on ourselves and say, oh man, we still did the right thing, or maybe we didn't, right? What if we're going to lose that funding anyways? That's a question we're asking ourselves, our organization. And I'd implore you all to ask, if we were to lose it anyways, where would we have wanted to take a stand? I think that's an important question to ask. The other piece is, when we gesture towards all, one of the reasons I want to back us up that we've been really clear in most spaces around diversity, equity, and inclusion around who we're talking about, because all has not intended to mean all, right? So when we lose the specificity of all, who is not hearing themselves, seeing themselves, and feeling themselves in that space when we lose the specificity? Because I promise you, there are folks who hear all and say, whoa, that's not me anymore. Or that has never been me, right? And so again, these are questions that I hope are opportunities for us to ask, right? Who feels themselves in that space as being part of that, right? That conversation, intentionally or unintentionally, we tend to that, right? And we're going to be making difficult decisions. And so what are our actions that back that up? What are the ways that we do the work that actually speaks to everyone? And to be really clear also, right, there's a really important term I remember learning in a research methods class that has always stuck with me, particularly in my equity, diversity, and inclusion approach, is what's measured matters, right? We focus on what's measured. And if we lose specificity, who are we saying matters? What are we saying matters? And how do we determine whether our outcomes are meeting our goals? Again, I can't answer that for any of you all, but it ought to be questions that we're asking. So I want to take a pause. Ivy, could you help me out here? What have I missed in the chat and what would you lift up?
Yeah, so I was in the process of going through all of the messaging. So in addition to the conversation and that original question that was posed about how do we balance all of this, there were some comments worrying about the neutrality we have as an organization and how we are caving towards erasure or fascism, losing the trust of our clients and partners while we're trying to keep the funds to continue the work. Talking a lot about diversifying funding. That way, if one takes a dip, we can keep going due to the others. And that as an organization, we're not stopping at the language and communicating our efforts towards equity, but also to reflect those in other ways internally, leadership composition, board composition, org policies, and practices. I know that there are sometimes, at least in my perspective, there are other ways that you can absolutely diversify and show people and have people see themselves in an organization that doesn't necessarily use the language. I know it seems like some people are worried about using specific language that's either inclusive or non-inclusive. And of course, a lot of us saw that article that went around with the words that we're not supposed to be using for grants, funding, and applications and things like that. But as somebody in marketing, I also try to take the opportunity that when I'm including images for a campaign or something on social media or in an email, that I'm looking to see if there are individuals that are disabled, or if there are individuals of color or individuals of different genders and ages and things like that. So there are ways to still kind of, I don't want to say quietly, because a lot of this work can't be done quietly and maybe shouldn't be done quietly, but to quietly continue showing that mission and showing that support of this without trying to worry about specific words necessarily. And I don't know if that helps anyone, but there are ways to continue making people feel seen and heard and valued on your websites and your content across different platforms without saying the words that might trigger less donations or somebody to drop off from your support, or to lose volunteers or anything like that. There are still ways to kind of put it in there strategically while maintaining your mission and hopefully your funding.
Thanks for that, Ivy. I also want to offer the counterpoint to what a lot of folks are lifting up, this risk around funding. What are the opportunities? I've heard from BIPOC donors who say we're looking for folks who are willing to take a stand. And it's not just, right, the BIPOC community. I'm talking about folks who have consistently seen, right, their identities challenged, contested, right, questioned in lots of different spaces. And there are folks who are looking for those that are willing to be courageous and those who are looking to, right, strengthen their communities. Where are the spaces in which this can be an asset for us? Because when we continue to frame this as only deficit, only risk, not only do we, again, like Makila shared so insightfully, do we lose the humanness in ourselves and others that we serve, I think we lose the fact that there's opportunity here too, right? And I don't mean this in a, right, be opportunistic and right, just frame marketing around this. How do we do this in a way that invites authenticity encourages vulnerability. And I would ask the question, what organizations, institutions, community groups are positioned well to be courageous in this moment? I think those of us who offer funding in the community are oftentimes positioned, right, to have an outsized voice in our communities. We have power in that influence. What are we going to do with that? And how are we listening to folks who are most impacted in this moment? So let's take a moment to check out our chat and the insight and wisdom that folks are offering here for us. And I'm just going to take a little facilitator pause here to catch up with y'all.
I just want to call out OJ Johnson's comment and just read it. One idea for marketing is to show and not tell. Like instead of having an equity, diversity, inclusion, access page, but having showcasing support to internal staffs through ERGs and external community members, like accessibility factors of resources available. I think that's really a great way to say you can take action and show versus tell. So thanks for that comment.
Thanks for lifting that up, Carol. What are others doing? What are strategies that you're taking? I know that you all are in this space and thinking about this all the time. And maybe what do you hope? What do you wish you were able to do right now?
In case anyone doesn't want to speak up yet, I know I can add from an internal stance at United Way Next. I have a lot of background in digital accessibility, and so at least on our end, which maybe a page like that would be beneficial for us because I don't know that people know that we're doing this. All of our images are now going to include alt text. I've been asking speakers if they've got slide decks to include alt text in their presentations and to utilize the accessibility features of PowerPoint to make sure that assistive technology can understand their presentations, because while a decent number of our members are currently still working, we were originally a retiree association, and so to think that individuals might need assistive technology is not out of the norm for that group or that population. And so we're doing that. We're making sure that I'm going through slide decks to make sure that there's no crazy super small fonts, that the data projections and charts and things like that are accessible, just at least in that aspect. There's other aspects where we're working to maintain our commitment to DEIB as well, but at least from my role, that's something that we're doing on our end and strategies that we're using.
Thanks, Ivy. Who else? I know you all are doing this work. What are you wondering about? What are you working on?
And if anyone doesn't want to share on this topic, there was another question that I could lift up as well from the chat.
Go ahead, Ivy.
When the impact is a slow process in programs related to this space, most donors want to see the impact in short-term programs. How do we handle this change?
I would imagine that this is not necessarily a change, right? Impact, when we think about it, is always short, medium, long term, and the probably most impactful work we can do takes time. And so, how are folks celebrating the near wins, the wins that we can identify, hold on to, and really demonstrate the milestones towards, right, some of our longer term goals. What does that look like for folks? I think Damon's offering a consideration here around convenings. Love this, right? This is solidarity in action around how are we sharing ideas? How are we sharing ideas, resources, and to be really clear, who's most vulnerable right now? I think we should be asking that question in a way that helps us guide our priorities and where we ought to be taking some action.
I loved this comment that said, I've been really thinking about how to communicate to our C-suite staff that we need top-down support for belonging and encouragement. If anyone has any advice to share or strategies for that, I think that'd be a great conversation as well.
I really encourage folks to revisit mission, vision, values. We spent quite a bit of time last week with our board of directors asking them this question around if we live truly into our values and we are successful in moving ourselves forward towards mission and vision, what do we have to do? And consistently, when we talked around equity, diversity, and inclusion, what came to light was we have to be courageous in this moment. Because the space of neutrality is so easy, right? To say, yeah, we'll just be neutral or we'll be quiet and we'll be safe. I firmly believe that safety is not offered in this moment through being quiet, by backing down or to make ourselves neutral. Safety is in community, safety is in solidarity, safety is in numbers. And so I encourage us to think about what does that mean fundamentally within our organizations, but within our communities. What does it mean to build solidarity? What does it mean, right, for several agencies contending, right, with some of these big questions to say, yeah, why don't we forge a way forward that may require courageousness, may require risk? Let's do it together. And through that, what questions might we have for each other? Can we pull resources and learn from, right, solidarity movements around legal risk, right? We know this is a concern for almost every organization I've talked to. Legal risk is a concern. Are there ways for us to learn from the solidarity movements and pool legal aid funds with other agencies that are moving in the same way? Are we willing as organizations to be nimble and agile and learn, right, from movement leaders around what solidarity looks like, around sharing, taking risk, and being really clear who of us? And I think OJ, one of many insightful considerations is how do those with positionality and oftentimes, right, with access, right, and positionality to speak, take courage right now to do that and to recognize who's really at risk right now. Most of us well-positioned in C-suite executive roles, we're not the most vulnerable folks in our community. And if our goal is to maintain our organization, we're missing mission, right? Are we protecting the organization or are we advancing mission? We have to be asking those difficult questions. It's a question I ask our organization all the time. Is our goal to exist, to subsist, and for us to have jobs? Or is our goal to serve our mission? Those are very, very different questions, and we'll find ourselves in very different places. And it's okay to say, yes, of course, job security is important. I have kids at home. I like that they have a warm home, right? And so do our community members that we're serving. They ought to have, right, the same consideration. Do their kids get to be fed, have a warm place to live? These are questions that we have to separate out around what's my own personal interest, what's our organization's interest, and how are we serving community? And I think until we're willing to wrestle with some of those bigger questions, we're going to find ourselves continuing, right, to be motivated maybe by some things that we wouldn't be super proud of or wouldn't want to share, right, with our donors, our team members, our community? What are the things that we can authentically and vulnerably say, I'm really proud that we're asking the hard questions. So at least when we make the decision, we know why it's motivated and how we're arriving in an action plan that serves the mission. And if we're not, then I would contend that we're probably a little bit off base. OJ, I think you had your hand up or maybe came off mute. Would you like to offer more wisdom for our group? Because I know it would be welcome.
Yeah, especially if I can find the unmute button. I raised my hand because I realized that C-suite is kind of a specified term, and I wanted to make sure I was using universal language. I meant C-suite in terms of like chief, anyone who has chief in their title or corporate in their title, typically leadership at the top, as well as board members who vote on important decisions. Kind of some insight that I've been thinking. I really loved everything you shared, and definitely will be reflecting on it for a while. But one thing I've been thinking about is I've been reading The Psychology of Money, and in it he talks about how risk and reward are very much like two sides of the same coin, and how sometimes it is a toss-up. And it kind of comes down to, is it worth losing? Do you care enough to lose? Do you care enough to win? And if you care enough for both, then you should pursue that. And that's just very much how I've felt about these matters, is that I care enough to bring it up and have someone tell me no, and I care enough to bring it up and have someone tell me yes. And that's what I've been trying to do as I push for support for our ERGs and affinities.
I know it in my bones, OJ, that you were going to continue to drop these massive nuggets of wisdom for us. So thank you for that. And thank you for providing clarity around C-suite and what you meant about that. I just so appreciate that piece around what are we willing, right, to do, I would say, invite, right, risk and reward, to win or to lose. And I think that the dichotomy is intentional in the space that you're presenting. But also it's not that clear, right? The winning or losing is more complicated than that. I wonder, and I come from a curiosity of what moves us. What do we see as that win, right? That's the question I would ask in that framing, OJ, is what is a win for us organizationally, individually, and for myself. I hope that it keeps my humanity intact by recognizing other folks, right? That for myself, in a place of access, in a place of resource, right, richness and abundance, that there's courageousness to be had right now. And to recognize, yeah, United Ways are dynamic and changing in so many ways. And yet we are, for most, every United Way I've ever met, are anchors in our community, right? We carry resources, we carry voice, we carry, right, influence in so many ways beyond financial. And yet we allow ourselves to focus so often only on the financial aspects of who we are. And I think we lose something when we divorce ourselves from who are we serving, who are we, and how do we want to show up, and what does that mean, right? And so that is such a contentious space, and I hope that we continue to wrestle with that. And I just want to recognize that there are a lot of folks on this call who are so passionate about this issue, and yet, right, are trying to contend with who else is in the space, who's going to hear me, who's right, whose supervisor is on this call that maybe is a little more risk averse. And I just applaud every single person that continues to show up in these spaces in a place of curiosity, in a place of willingness to find solidarity and hopefulness. I want to recognize that we're winding down in our time. And so I want to kind of roll this out at the very end to say there is so much hopefulness to be had. Our communities have demonstrated for thousands of years resilience, right? And there's resistance happening every day. And I'd encourage folks who maybe are new in this space around thinking about resistance, right? What is our role in that? How do we agitate or disrupt or offer a different consideration? And what's the thing that might make us a little bit uncomfortable, but we're able to, right? We're able to offer consideration. We can ask a question that helps our organizations, helps leaders, right? Think about this moment in a fundamentally different way than maybe we've been framing this conversation. And so the hopefulness I offer is that there is still joy in this moment, right? We are still finding so much opportunity to be in community, to be in relationship, to find joy, to find success, to be innovative. And I implore those of you who have not, right, taken those pauses in your day to reflect on what is going well. We are having this conversation. We're in a position to say, what is, right, the role of leaders in this moment, talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Gosh, what a powerful opportunity for us to celebrate that today. We've done something already, right? But I'd like to offer, if folks would take to the chat for those who are feeling that they want to unmute, or to offer to Ivy to pass through to the group. What's giving you hope, and where are you finding joy?
And if anyone wants to send me a direct message and just have me read it out loud, I am more than happy to do that as well.
Share something I'm thinking of, and as you all are drafting your comments and maybe preparing some thoughts, there are more folks asking the question around what we can do, how we can help, than I have really ever remembered in recent history. People want to help, they want to care, and they want to show up for their neighbors. And I really believe that when we see and harness, right, the goodness in each other, our community members care. They don't want kids in our neighborhoods and our communities to be hungry. They don't want folks to be, right, cold in winter times and without a place to go that is safe and welcoming and right, welcomes them. Fundamentally, there's a goodness. And where I find so much appreciation right now is that we are asking the question, what can we be doing wherever we are positioned, however we are positioned in our communities, to do good? And I encourage folks to remember that our neighbors want to do that. Our neighbors are asking the same question. And there's such opportunity. We are ripe for this moment. And to be very clear, we will not stay in this moment, right? Pendulum swings. It will go back and forth. We're not stuck in this moment. There's not an inevitability in this moment. And there is so much goodness that is happening that we need to be willing to look for it, right? To lift it up when it's happening. I think this has shown up a couple of times, so I want to read it. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, right? What a powerful consideration. All right, I'm going to invite you all to drop one word of how you're feeling today as we wrap up our time together. And I'll stay on a little while with our friends at United Way Next in case folks want to chat a little bit more. But one word in our chat here. How are you feeling as you set off for the rest of your day? Go ahead, Ivy.
Sorry. And as we are doing that, I did want to include one of the direct messages I received. I'm finding hope in this messaging so different from what we've we're being asked / told to do, and joining and educating those in my circle. I absolutely love that message, and I completely understand that feeling. As we are dropping in the one word before hopping out, I did just want to mention that our next DEIB Roundtable is being held on May 21st. I'll make sure that you guys all have the link to join that as well. And then when we do hop out of this event, there will be, I believe, a 3-question survey. It's anonymous. You don't have to worry about your responses. That is just going to help us figure out how we can best serve you guys and plan the best events for you, with hopefully less Zoom issues next time. This was a first for us, so I apologize for the inconvenience. But if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out. I'll include all of our contact information, and I'm excited to see all of your answers in the chat.
Appreciate y'all so much. Carol, Deborah, what would you add to close us out?
I would like to just say thank you to you, Jen. It was just a meaningful experience, and I think the word leadership takes on a new meaning, a new level of reflection in the way you presented it. So thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to all of you for participating. Thank you to United Way Next, to Carol and Ivy for facilitating these great conversations, and to the entire board of United Way Next and the amazing work that they do.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Ivy, for all the support behind the scenes and raising up and lifting up all the commentary and questions today. And especially to each of you for being in this space. I will tell you that I feel hopeful and more positive after today's conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at a next event, but especially at the next roundtable in May, where Sherry Sanchez-Tibbetts will be sharing her words of wisdom. As many of you may have heard from her last fall when we hosted our November 7th roundtable, where all 4 of our guest speakers this year were featured. So we look forward to having the opportunity to spend time with you in community. If there is anything that you need, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Charmaine Brown from United Way Worldwide was having tech issues today. She did join, or she did share. She will listen to this recording, and she will take forward any information from this session to also be an advocate on behalf of the local United Ways across the country. So I wanted you to know that, and across the world. So thank you all again for being here today. And as Jen mentioned, we'll stay on for just a few moments in case anyone has any other comments or thoughts or questions that you'd like to ask. Otherwise, thank you and have a great day.